There was a time when Sean Diddy Combs was more than just a rapper or a producer. He was the culture. Born in Harlem and raised in Mount Vernon, New York, Diddy came from hustle. As a young intern at Uptown Records, he wasn't just fetching coffee. He was watching, learning, maneuvering. And in 1993, when he founded Bad Boy Records, he didn't just launch a label, he launched an empire. In the golden age of hip-hop, Bad Boy Records became a household name. Diddy had Biggie, he had Masses, he had Faith Evans. The music was iconic, but it wasn't just about sound. It was a whole lifestyle. He revolutionized the music video, turned parties into status symbols, and made sure everyone knew. When Diddy entered the room changed. His influence spread like wildfire. Sean John, his clothing line, hit the runways and department stores, selling millions. His name was stamped across Ciroc vodka, high-end fragrances, reality TV, and even Revolt, a media network aimed at giving a voice to Black culture. Forbes often listed him among the richest entertainers in the world. Billionaire talk wasn't a dream, it was the expectation. From walking red carpets with Jennifer Lopez to hosting all-white parties that were basically royalty meetings for celebrities, Diddy represented success in its flashiest form. Private jets, diamond chains, mansions in Miami and Los Angeles. He wasn't just wealthy, he was untouchable, or so it seemed. Because behind the scenes, whispers grew louder. Not everyone saw a king. Some saw a controller, a master manipulator, someone whose charm masked something darker. But in those days, allegations didn't stick. They were deflected with money, ignored by the press, or silenced behind NDAs. People whispered, but no one screamed. Yet even as stories occasionally surfaced about outbursts, abuse rumors, and shady business tactics, Diddy kept winning. The narrative never changed. He was still the mogul, still the man who rose from nothing, still the American dream in a designer suit. And for decades, no one, not the courts, not the media, not even his closest collaborators, challenged that dream. Because challenging Diddy meant challenging the system that built him. But eventually, dreams crack. And when they do, the silence that protected them begins to unravel. For years, Diddy's image was tightly controlled, slick, confident, untouchable. But behind the velvet rope, behind the flashing cameras and choreographed smiles, there were cracks. And those cracks had names. In the early 2000s, murmurs turned into lawsuits. Former associates and employees started to come forward, quietly at first. One claimed wrongful termination, another alleged verbal abuse. Most of these cases never reached trial. Settlements came fast. Confidentiality agreements sealed lips. And Diddy's team? They kept the machine running, fast, polished, and lethal when necessary. But there were moments even a PR army couldn't contain. There was that nightclub shooting in 1999. Diddy and then-girlfriend Jennifer Lopez were at Club New York when a gun went off during a fight. 3 people were injured. Diddy's protege, Shine, took the fall and served almost a decade in prison. Diddy acquitted, untouched. He walked out of that courtroom with his name intact and his empire stronger than ever. Still, people whispered about how everyone around Diddy seemed disposable, how success followed him, but so did chaos. Artists like the LOX and Mace eventually voiced their frustrations. They spoke about shady contracts, missing royalties, and feeling controlled. Some called it the price of fame, others called it exploitation. But the industry looked the other way, because Diddy was Diddy. He wasn't just a music mogul, he was a gatekeeper, a tastemaker, a man with the power to make or break a career with a single phone call. And when women came forward, models, assistants, even former lovers, the stories were met with skepticism. One described him as jealous and controlling. Another mentioned isolation, manipulation, the sudden switch from charm to rage. But nothing stuck. He was still hosting award shows, still topping Forbes lists, still throwing million-dollar parties where everyone wanted an invite. The public saw what they were meant to see, but the women, the employees, the people left behind when the music faded, They carried stories no one wanted to hear until one woman finally said, enough. For nearly a decade, she was always there, at his side in his videos, on the red carpet. Cassandra Ventura, known to the world as Cassie, wasn't just Diddy's protege. She was his partner, his muse, his shadow. But in November 2023, she stepped out of the shadow and into the light. Without warning, Cassie filed a civil lawsuit in New York, alleging that Diddy had subjected her to years of abuse, physical, emotional, and sexual. The documents were graphic, disturbing, and unflinching. She accused Diddy of rape, of beating her, of forcing her into acts she did not consent to, of controlling every aspect of her life, what she wore, who she saw, when she could speak. The lawsuit detailed a decade of silence and fear, painted through hotel room assaults, forced drug use, and mind games. She claimed he had the money and power to make it all disappear, and for years it did, until she broke. The world didn't know how to react. Some called it opportunistic, others called it overdue. But within 24 hours, something unprecedented happened. Diddy settled. He didn't deny. He didn't fight. He paid quickly and quietly. That wasn't normal. Not for someone who had spent decades denying everything, lawyering up and walking away untouched. To many, that silence was an admission. And Cassie, she didn't disappear after the settlement. Her lawyers made it clear. This wasn't just about money. It was about breaking a wall that had stood for too long, one built on fear, influence, and unchecked power. Once that wall cracked, the flood came. Multiple women, new lawsuits, new claims, from former employees, ex-lovers, and collaborators. Suddenly, the empire Diddy built on charm, image, and money started to crumble. And it all began with one voice. A woman the world thought was just another celebrity girlfriend. Turns out she was the first domino, and the fall wasn't over yet. When Cassie's lawsuit broke the silence, it wasn't just a personal reckoning. It was a signal, one that echoed across the industry. And within weeks, more voices came forward. The stories were hauntingly similar. Different women from different times all described the same patterns: control, fear, and a man who seemed to believe he was untouchable. There were allegations of drugs being forced, of parties that spiraled into dangerous territory, and of people being monitored, even stalked, when they tried to leave. One lawsuit, filed anonymously by a woman identified as Jane Doe, accused Diddy of raping her in the early 1990s, when she was underage. Another lawsuit claimed that he trafficked women across state lines for sex parties, often involving drugs and coercion. Former employees, bodyguards, drivers, assistants, quietly began to corroborate pieces of these stories. And then, in March 2024, the world saw something it never expected. Federal agents stormed Diddy's homes in Los Angeles and Miami. The raids were massive, involving Homeland Security and armed tactical units. Streets were blocked. Neighbors watched from behind windows. News helicopters captured every angle as agents carried out hard drives, security footage, and boxes of documents. The images were jarring. This wasn't a rap video or a tabloid stunt. This was real. The federal warrants reportedly focused on allegations of sex trafficking and illegal surveillance. It was as if the most guarded secrets of Diddy's empire were being pulled into the light, piece by piece. And yet, as the raids unfolded, Diddy himself was nowhere to be seen. His lawyers issued a statement calling the allegations lies motivated by money and fame. But the silence from Diddy personally was deafening. For years, he'd been the loudest man in the room. Now, when the world demanded answers, he had none. As more lawsuits piled on, 5, then 6, then more, the industry began to take notice. Streaming platforms scaled back his presence. Sponsors quietly ended partnerships. Even Revolt, the media company he co-founded, publicly distanced itself. For the first time in decades, Diddy's empire looked fragile, not because of one lawsuit or one rumor, but because the stories no longer stood alone. They formed a pattern too big to ignore. And the question now wasn't just, is Diddy guilty? It was, how long has this been happening, and how many people look the other way? For decades, the music industry thrived on a culture of silence, especially when it came to powerful men like Sean Diddy Combs. He wasn't just a producer, he was a brand, a gatekeeper, a symbol of hip-hop royalty. He launched careers, signed deals worth millions, and had deep connections in music, fashion, film, and media. So when allegations began to surface, many were quick to dismiss them. Some called them clout chasing. Others insisted it was just another attack on a successful black man. Public relations teams went into overdrive. Legal reps issued blanket denials. And former collaborators? Many stayed quiet. But something shifted after the federal raids. Suddenly, the silence felt like complicity. Industry insiders began whispering about things they'd seen or chosen to ignore. A-list celebrities quietly untagged themselves from Diddy-related events. Award show tributes disappeared from streaming. Interviews were scrubbed. Media outlets that once glorified Diddy's lavish lifestyle began digging deeper. Articles emerged not just about the lawsuits, but about the systemic protection that allowed him to operate unchecked for so long. One former Revolt staffer described the culture as walking on eggshells. Another said, everyone knew something was off, but you don't challenge the king. The public, too, began to respond differently. Hashtags like #surviving Diddy started trending. TikTok became a hub for think pieces and breakdowns of lawsuits. Survivors were given space to speak, and they were finally being heard. Even longtime fans found themselves questioning, was the music we loved built on a foundation of abuse? Major brands distanced themselves. Liquor partnerships vanished. Endorsement deals collapsed. It wasn't about damage control anymore. It was about accountability. And still, Diddy said nothing. He wasn't arrested. He wasn't charged. But the court of public opinion had begun its trial. This wasn't just a scandal. It was a reckoning. Because when powerful men fall, they rarely fall alone. They pull systems, enablers, and institutions down with them. And the music industry was forced to confront its own reflection in the mirror. Who knew? Who stayed silent? Who helped him rise, despite the warnings? And as the world waited for the next chapter, one thing became clear. The age of silence was over. To understand the storm now circling Sean Diddy Combs, we need to understand the empire he built and how he built it. Diddy didn't just climb the ranks of the music industry, he redefined them. From a young intern at Uptown Records in the early 1990s to launching Bad Boy Records, he transformed himself from an unknown into a cultural force. He wasn't just behind the music. He was the music. He discovered the notorious B.I.G. He produced platinum albums. He created fashion lines, vodka brands, television networks. He threw legendary parties that blurred the line between business and spectacle. He dated pop icons. He bought mansions. He created a brand so large it eclipsed criticism. Diddy wasn't just successful, he was powerful. And power unchecked becomes dangerous. Former employees have described him as magnetic, but volatile, brilliant, but controlling, generous, but paranoid. Some said he inspired loyalty. Others said he demanded it. He didn't tolerate disobedience. He kept tabs. He monitored people's whereabouts. Some claim he had recording devices installed at parties, on private jets, even in bedrooms. There are allegations, not just of violence, but of psychological warfare. And because Diddy made people money, they didn't ask questions. They laughed off the temper. They ignored the rumors. They convinced themselves it was part of the game. But behind the champagne and flashbulbs was a man who seemed increasingly obsessed with control. Control over careers, over image, over people's lives. As his wealth grew, so did the bubble around him. Few people could challenge him. Fewer dared. And in that bubble, darkness can grow unchecked. The lawsuits and accusations now surfacing paint a chilling picture. Not just of one man's actions, but of an entire ecosystem that allowed him to operate without consequence. A system that rewarded silence, that punished dissent, that forgot fame is not a shield from accountability. Because behind every empire, there is a foundation. And when that foundation is built on fear, eventually it cracks. And when it does, the fall is loud. The silence didn't last long. In early 2024, the accusations against Diddy exploded into public consciousness. Civil lawsuits surfaced, each more disturbing than the last. Allegations of rape, sex trafficking, physical assault, coercion, illegal surveillance, each one painting a horrifying mosaic of power gone unchecked. And then, the raid. On March 25th, Homeland Security agents descended on Diddy's homes in Los Angeles and Miami. Helicopters circled overhead. Tactical officers stormed the gates. News cameras rolled as law enforcement carried out boxes of evidence, hard drives, and electronics. It wasn't just dramatic. It was unprecedented. For decades, Diddy had been untouchable. A mogul, a brand. But now the world saw something different. A man under siege. He wasn't arrested that day, but the message was clear. This was serious. The public reaction was instant and polarized. Some longtime fans were in disbelief. Others said they weren't surprised at all. Surviving Diddy began trending. New accusers came forward. Old footage was reanalyzed. Past interviews now sounded like warnings we all ignored. The industry, once silent, began to distance itself. Ciroc pulled back branding. Revolt TV issued a statement. Collaborators went quiet. It was a slow unraveling of a legacy once thought indestructible. And yet, as of now, Diddy walks free. He's not been charged with any crime. His legal team has denied all wrongdoing. They call the lawsuits baseless, the raids excessive, the media coverage a witch hunt. But the court of public opinion isn't waiting for trial. In today's world where fame can be both sword and shield, Diddy's story has become a case study in what happens when power meets silence, and then finally resistance. Whether or not he faces criminal charges remains uncertain. But one thing is clear. The man once seen as hip-hop's kingmaker is now being scrutinized like never before. And whatever comes next, justice, redemption, or further silence, the story of Sean Diddy Combs has forever changed. Because the walls didn't just crack, they crumbled. This story is far from over. As more truth surfaces, one thing is certain. Silence is no longer an option. If this case moved you, subscribe for more untold stories that demand to be heard. And remember, power doesn't protect forever, but your voice might protect someone else. Thanks for watching.